Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the minister here at First UU. In her 2011 preface to the paperback edition of her book, The Next American Revolution, a 96-year-old Grace Lee Boggs wrote, "We have a long road ahead, because the rising grassroots movements provide the opportunity to create a new system of democracy, work, education, and environmental stewardship based on completely different values. That means we have to think seriously about values and not just abuses. We need to understand that we are at one of those turning points in history where we need revolution, and revolution means reinventing culture. We need to ask ourselves new questions about how to provide for the general welfare and how to educate our children. We must create ways to meet these basic needs, not mainly through a growing number of public workers, but through caring for one another in beloved communities. With the end of the empire, we are coming to an end of the epoch of rights. We have entered the epoch of responsibilities, which require new, more socially minded human beings and new, more participatory and place-based concepts of citizenship and democracy. Since last summer, we have been a part of a collective of UU congregations that curate and engage with a common curriculum each month, exploring a particular theme. These themes help us to get clear about our values and to name actions and behaviors that support those values. They explore UU principles with readings, activities, and other resources that contextualize our principles amidst current realities and ask us to make them more than platitudes. The front page of the Soul Matters packet typically includes the words, "What does it mean to be a people of whatever the monthly theme is?" Grace Lee Boggs has long been asking the question of what it means to be human. Writing in 2011, she said that to make a revolution, people must not only struggle against existing institutions, they must make a philosophical leap and become more human beings. In order to transform the world, they must transform themselves, recognizing that reality is constantly changing, that an idea that is progressive at one point can turn into its opposite at a later point. We must commit ourselves to this kind of transformational organizing which does not mainly denounce and protest oppression or mobilize Americans to struggle for more material things, but challenges us as Americans to evolve or transform ourselves into a more human beings. The moment of time that we are in, with its dehumanizing policies and destructive practices, calls for revolution. Systems of oppression and marginalization must be dismantled, and new systems built with compassion and care for all people must replace them. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about the work of Valerie Kaur and her Manifesto of Revolutionary Love. This is the work I believe we are called to in this moment. The hard work of interrogating our institutions to identify and extract systems of privilege, supremacy, and violence, and to begin to rebuild our very foundations with the building blocks of beloved community. We have talked about beloved community a lot this month. In Sunday services, in Sunday morning RE, in youth meetings, UU connections, Soul Matters small groups, Welcome Wednesdays. If you haven't had the opportunity to explore the theme further than what you hear on Sunday morning, I encourage you to get plugged into one or more of those spaces. In these conversations, we've discussed beloved community and what it is, what it's not, what it takes to create and sustain it, where we have seen it in our own lives, where we have seen its opposite, and what we can do to personally begin building it. After all this conversation about beloved community this month and spending considerable time with Grace Lee Boggs' writing this week, I've pulled out a few of her ideas that seem helpful to us in this conversation. They are the need to think seriously about our values and not just abuses, to internalize the need for revolution and accept that it means reinventing culture, including the culture that benefits us. To commit to the formation of beloved communities that exist within our congregation and outside of it, committing to contribute to it even and maybe especially when we aren't the direct beneficiaries. What if in every meeting, every conversation, instead of spending an hour picking apart the perceived abuses, failures, and questionable religious or non-religious worldviews of others, we spent more time focusing on our own values and principles and how we might live up to them? There will always be a need for prophetic voices to call out injustice and immoral or unethical actions and policies, and we're pretty good at that. But how are we at calling ourselves in toward our own values and principles, and holding our own words and actions up for inspection based on those values and principles? What if we didn't leave a meeting where we heartily debated some issue or concept without asking what it means for our own lives in light of the principles that we claim to live by? What if every person of every age and race and orientation in this congregation knew that they had a voice in the cultural shift of this community? Because Greta Thunberg was 15 when she yelled, "How dare you," to the world, a message that she had been sharing in more personal and local spaces since she learned about climate change at the age of 8. And Grace Lee Boggs was 96 when she wrote, "We have a long road ahead." In my early years of pastoral ministry, I worked as a faith-based community organizer, and it fundamentally shaped the way I understand ministry and my own task as a leader. So I'm sorry, not sorry, as they say, that many of my messages incorporate principles of community organizing alongside the principles of Unitarian Universalism. The organizing principle that I can't get out of my head this week is the first revolution is internal. A few weeks ago on Valentine's Day, AJ led an activity on video where we watched them draw increasingly larger concentric hearts. I'm not sure that geometrically hearts can be concentric, but hopefully you know what I mean. The activity demonstrated how our love begins within us and with those closest to us, and it continually grows outward. This is similar to what I think of when I think of the first revolution being internal. It starts in my own heart and mind. And collectively, it starts in our congregational heart, mind, principles, and practices, both individually and congregationally. To contribute to positive change in the world, we have to do the internal work, sometimes in preparation for the external work, and sometimes in tandem with the external work. Writing for the Interaction Institute for Social Change, Jen Wilsey writes, "We can go on collaborating and making surface level reforms, but I think it is time for us to do the deeper work of building a beloved community, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called us to do. Harnessing love as a force for social transformation is key to effective collaboration. By love, we don't mean sentimental love for people or being nice to one another. We mean the kind of love that takes work to live out in practice. This is the kind of love that requires us to look critically yet gently at the way our actions and behaviors impact other people, whether intentionally or unintentionally. To check our assumptions, to cultivate humility, to give and receive honest feedback, to make mistakes and learn from them." And she writes, "Above all, this kind of love requires us to stay present with each other as human beings in an evolving quest for reconciliation." One of the ways we stay present with each other and continue in our quest for reconciliation and transformation is by committing ourselves to communities of practice that inspire us by feeding our spirits, engaging our minds, and challenging us to live our principles and continue learning and growing no matter how young or old we may be. Even as these institutions create places of belonging for us as individuals, we recognize that they themselves have been built on foundations of oppression and marginalization. So as we work in communities to better ourselves, we must also work together for the transformation of those very communities, so that they might better serve all who need to find a place of belonging and know that they can show up bringing all of who they are into the community. Congregational transformation requires another commitment and a different set of skills and practices, and is every bit as important as individual transformation. Reverend Jan Christian, Congregational Life Staff for the Pacific Western region of the UUA, wrote, "Establishing and maintaining beloved community depends on establishing and maintaining covenantal relationships. The covenant is our sacred promise of meaningful relationship, which we mutually develop by inquiring into our deeply held values as a community. We also develop a set of restorative practices as a resource for the inevitable times when we depart from covenant. So we have a clear path to restoring relationships and returning to our shared values when disconnection occurs." Christian recommends an intentional process for communities who need to create or reaffirm covenantal relationships. The process begins with naming the community's values in sessions that she calls heartstorming, where everyone has a chance to answer a question like, what is most precious to you as a part of this community? With a robust list of values that includes all voices, a community can set out to create a covenant, asking, what specific strategy or behavior would you want us to commit to practice in order to nurture and express our community values? With this information, a covenant can be created that honors the values of the gathered community today. For a growing and diverse community, every process of covenant creation will be different because we will have included voices that were not a part of the previous conversation. We've learned new things about ourselves and others and the world we are trying to inhabit together. A covenant is a living document that guides life together for a living, growing, changing community. And we will break it, we will slip, we will fail one another. Covenantal relationships are built for that, for the recognition that sometimes as humans, our intentions aren't the best, and that even when they are, the impact of our actions and words can fall short. So a covenantal community gets good at saying, that hurt, and I'm sorry. And the impact of my action shows that I have something to learn, and I'm committed to doing my own work to learn those things. And then these are the things I'm going to do to restore our covenantal relationship so that we can keep living our values together. Living in covenant with one another requires accountability. And let's be honest, we don't like that. I remember when I first started working as a community organizer, and our day-long staff meetings included hours of agitation and accountability. And I thought, these people are straight up sadistic. But if I'm honest, I have to say that those have been the most real, loving, and personally developmental work and community relationships I've ever had, because we held each other accountable to the values that we said we were going to live up to together. For individuals, the building blocks of beloved community are words, actions, and practices. And for a community such as ours, I believe the building blocks include a covenantal process that includes all voices, includes practice for restoration, and at times revision, and gives us hope that we can live out our values together in ways that make our world a better place. Grace Lee Boggs closed an interview about the transformation that she had seen in her work in Detroit with these words: to name Detroit as a city of hope, to say that our right, our duty, is to shape the world with a new dream, to rebuild, redefine, and respirit our city. That's a wonderful message to be able to carry. Friends, I hope that we too will carry such a message, that we too will begin to shape our world with a new dream and rebuild, redefine, and respirit our congregation, our community, and our world, with beloved community as our driving vision. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.